I'm Kathy, 32 female. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood with my fiancé, Mark, and our golden retriever, Gus. As a marketing director for a major tech firm, my life is a series of deadlines, campaigns, and meticulously planned strategies. I thrive on order and execution, which is why I thought planning my own destination wedding would be a breeze. I had every detail locked down, every contingency planned for. What I didn't plan for was that the biggest disaster wouldn't be the weather or a vendor, but the very people I was doing it all for, my own family. They enjoyed a week-long, all-expenses-paid tropical vacation on my dime, only to abandon me on the morning of my wedding, leaving my fiancé and me to get married in front of rows of empty chairs. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The dream of a destination wedding had been mine since I was a little girl. Not for the glamour, but for the intimacy. I pictured a small group of the people I loved most, celebrating under a warm sun, away from the pressures and obligations of a big wedding at home. My fiancé, Mark, an architect with a love for beautiful landscapes, was immediately on board. We scouted locations for months before settling on a breathtaking boutique resort in Costa Rica, nestled between lush rainforest and pristine beachfront. It was perfect. It was also expensive. Mark and I had saved diligently for years. We weren't millionaires, but we were comfortable, and we decided this was our one big splurge. We wanted to make it an unforgettable experience, not just for us, but for our families. My family consists of my parents, Susan and David, and my younger brother, Leo. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the planner, the straight-A student. Leo was the charismatic troublemaker, the one who could charm his way out of any problem, and for whom my parents' rules always seemed to bend. My mom, a real estate agent, always called him a people person, while my dad, a sales executive, admired what he called Leo's hustle. To me, it just looked like a lifelong aversion to responsibility. But he was my brother, and I loved him, I thought. When we announced our wedding plans, the reaction was mixed. Mark's parents were thrilled, immediately booking their flights and sending us a generous check to help with costs. My family, however, was hesitant. Costa Rica? That's so far, Kathy, my mother said over the phone, her voice laced with a familiar tone of passive complaint. And it sounds expensive. That's when I made the offer that would eventually become the anchor of their betrayal. Don't worry about the cost, I said, eager for their approval. Mark and I have it covered. We're booking a block of suites at the resort for the whole week. All you have to do is get yourselves here. It's our gift to you. The hesitation in my mother's voice vanished, replaced by effusive excitement. Suddenly, Costa Rica wasn't too far. It was a wonderful idea. My dad echoed her enthusiasm, and Leo sent me a text with a dozen palm tree emojis. For the next year, planning was my second job. I coordinated with Isabella, the resort's amazing wedding planner. I chose the flowers, the menu, the music. I created detailed itineraries for our guests, complete with local excursions, group dinners, and plenty of free time for them to relax. I paid for everything in advance. The 5-star suites for my parents and Leo, a snorkeling trip, a guided rainforest hike, and private dinners at the resort's best restaurants. I wanted them to feel pampered. I wanted them to see how much they meant to me, to us. My parents repeatedly told me how generous I was, how they couldn't wait to see me walk down the aisle. Leo FaceTimed me from the bar he managed, telling me he was practicing his best man's speech. I believed them. I had no reason not to. The week of the wedding arrived, and it started like a dream. We all flew in on a Sunday, the ceremony scheduled for the following Saturday. The resort was even more beautiful than in the pictures. My parents oohed and awed at their ocean view suite, complete with a private balcony and a welcome basket I'd curated myself. Leo immediately found the swim-up bar and declared it his new office. For the first few days, everything was perfect. We laughed, we swam, we ate incredible food. Mark and I were in a blissful bubble, surrounded by family, feeling overjoyed that our dream was coming true. My family seemed to be having the time of their lives. They went on every excursion, ordered room service whenever they wanted, and charged cocktails to the room, My room. I didn't mind. I just smiled, happy to see them happy. There were, in hindsight, tiny red flags. My mother kept referring to the trip as the vacation, rarely the wedding. She'd say things like, "This vacation is just what your father and I needed." My dad spent a lot of time on his phone, checking work emails, seemingly detached from the upcoming event. Leo treated the resort like his personal playground. He flirted with the staff, stayed out late with other guests, and talked endlessly about a huge opportunity waiting for him back home, a chance to invest in a new nightclub. I dismissed it all as them just being them. Mom was always a bit self-absorbed, Dad was a workaholic, and Leo was just being Leo. I was too high on the joy of the occasion to see the cracks forming in the foundation of my perfect wedding week. On Friday, the day before the wedding, we had the rehearsal. It was a beautiful, simple affair on the beach at sunset. Leo, my brother and Mark's best man, fumbled through his part, smelling faintly of tequila, but he was there. My father practiced walking me down the sandy aisle. My mother cried, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, telling me how proud she was. We had a lovely rehearsal dinner afterward. I made a toast, thanking everyone for traveling so far to be with us. "It means the world to us that you're here to share this moment," I said, my voice thick with emotion. My father raised his glass. "To Kathy and Mark," he said, "we wouldn't miss it for the world." That night, I went to bed with a full heart, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. The sky was clear, the air was warm, and in less than 12 hours, I would be married to the love of my life, surrounded by everyone I cared about. I had no idea that as I slept, my perfect dream was being dismantled, packed away, and scheduled for an early morning flight home. I woke up on my wedding day to the sound of tropical birds and the gentle lapping of waves. Sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains of our bridal suite, painting the room in soft, golden hues. For a moment, I just lay there, soaking it all in, a sense of profound peace settling over me. Today was the day. After a year of planning, stress, and anticipation, it was finally here. Mark was already up, having moved to the adjacent suite we'd booked for him to get ready in. He'd left a single white orchid on my pillow with a note, "Can't wait to see you, my love." I smiled, my heart fluttering with excitement. The ceremony wasn't until 4 p.m., so the morning was meant to be relaxed. My mother and I were scheduled for hair and makeup at 11 a.m., followed by a light lunch. Around 8 a.m., I sent a cheerful good morning text to our family group chat. "Happy wedding day, can't wait to celebrate with you all." Minutes passed with no reply. That was unusual. My mom was an early riser and always quick with a response. I tried calling her cell. It went straight to voicemail. Then I called my dad. Voicemail. A small, cold knot began to form in my stomach. I tried Leo. Voicemail again. "That's weird," I mumbled to myself. Maybe they were all at breakfast together and had left their phones in their rooms. Yes, that had to be it. I decided to get dressed and walk over to the resort's main restaurant to find them. As I walked along the stone pathway, the beauty of the resort felt almost mocking. The vibrant flowers, the sparkling pools, the smiling staff, it all seemed to exist in a different reality from the growing anxiety inside me. I reached the restaurant and scanned the patrons. They weren't there. I checked the smaller cafe near the beach, not there either. The knot in my stomach tightened. I walked to their suites, which were in the same villa block as mine. I knocked on my parents' door. No answer. I knocked louder. Silence. I did the same at Leo's door next to it. Nothing. A genuine sense of panic started to set in. Where could they be? Had something happened? My mind raced through terrible possibilities. An accident? A medical emergency? I hurried to the front desk, my heart pounding against my ribs. The receptionist, a kind woman named Alina, greeted me with a warm smile. "Good morning, Ms. Kathy, a beautiful day for a wedding." Her cheerfulness felt like a slap in the face. "Alina, hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't find my family. My parents, Susan and David, and my brother, Leo. They aren't in their rooms or at breakfast." "Have you seen them?" Alina's smile faltered as she saw the panic in my eyes. She typed their names into her computer, her brow furrowed. "One moment," she said, picking up a phone and speaking quietly in Spanish. I stood there, wringing my hands, feeling the eyes of other guests on me. The bride, looking frantic on the morning of her wedding. After a minute, she hung up. She looked at me with an expression of deep pity. "Ma'am," she began slowly, choosing her words carefully. "Your family, they checked out this morning." The words didn't compute. Checked out? What do you mean checked out? That's impossible. My wedding is this afternoon. Elena looked down at her screen, then back at me. The records show they settled the incidentals and were taken to the airport by a resort shuttle at 5:30 a.m. 5:30 a.m. The sun wasn't even up at 5:30 a.m. My breath caught in my throat. "No," I whispered. "No, there's been a mistake, a terrible mistake." Elena shook her head gently. "I'm so sorry. The concierge confirmed it. They took the 7 a.m. flight back to the States." I felt the world tilt on its axis. My family had left. They had checked out of the hotel in the pre-dawn hours of my wedding day and flown home without a word. It didn't make any sense. The air in the lobby suddenly felt thick and suffocating. I stumbled back from the desk, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and horror. Why? Why would they do this? It had to be an emergency. A real life-or-death emergency. That was the only possible explanation. Someone must be sick. Someone must have died. That had to be it. I rushed back to my suite, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock the door. I grabbed my phone, my fingers flying across the screen. I called my mom again. Voicemail, Dad, voicemail, Leo, voicemail. I tried their home landline, no answer. I sent a flurry of frantic texts. "Where are you? The hotel says you flew home. What is going on? Please call me." The silence that followed was deafening. I collapsed onto the edge of the bed, the beautiful white orchids still lying on the pillow, a cruel reminder of the joy I'd felt just an hour ago. The joy had evaporated, replaced by a cold, terrifying dread. Mark found me like that a few minutes later, sitting frozen in my robe, staring blankly at the wall. He took one look at my face and was instantly at my side. "Kathy, what is it? What's wrong?" I couldn't speak. I just held out my phone, showing him the unanswered calls. In a choked voice, I managed to tell him what the front desk had said. He stared at me in disbelief. "What? That's insane. It has to be a mistake." But as he tried calling them himself, and each call went directly to voicemail, the same horrifying realization dawned on him. They were gone. His face, which had been so full of love and excitement earlier, hardened with a mixture of anger and concern. He wrapped his arms around me as I finally broke down, the sobs racking my entire body. My family had abandoned me on my wedding day. The people who were supposed to be in the front row, cheering me on, were on a plane flying thousands of miles away. And I had no idea why. The hours that followed were a blur of tears, confusion, and a desperate search for answers. Mark was my rock. He held me, made calls to his own family to update them, and spoke with Isabella, our wedding planner, to explain the situation. Isabella was a true professional, her calm demeanor a small island of stability in my raging sea of emotion. She immediately offered to postpone, to cancel, to do whatever we needed. But the thought of canceling felt like letting them win, like admitting that my wedding day was meaningless without them. "No," I said, my voice hoarse from crying. "We're still getting married." Mark looked at me, his eyes full of love and support. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. I nodded, a new, fragile sense of resolve hardening within me. "I'm not letting them take this from us too." As the morning wore on, my frantic hope for a call explaining some catastrophic, unavoidable emergency began to curdle into a sick suspicion. A true emergency would have come with a phone call, a text, a message left with the hotel something. The silence was what felt so malicious. It was a deliberate choice. Around 10 a.m., my phone finally buzzed. It was a text from my mother. My hands trembled as I opened it. The message was short, devoid of any warmth or apology. "Kathy, so sorry, had to fly back. Leo had an emergency. No time to explain, we'll call later." That was it. Leo had an emergency. No details. No, I love you. No, we are heartbroken to miss your wedding. Just a cold, sterile message that felt more like a corporate memo than a note from a mother to her daughter on her wedding day. I showed the text to Mark. His jaw tightened. An emergency that required all three of them to leave in the middle of the night? An emergency that prevented them from making a 30-second phone call? He asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. "What kind of emergency is that?" I didn't have an answer. My mind was still struggling to process the coldness of it all. Leo. Of course, it was about Leo. It had always been about Leo. My scheduled hair and makeup appointment came and went. I sat in my robe, numbly scrolling through my phone, rereading that single, cruel text message. My own mother couldn't be bothered to call me. She had time to pack, check out, travel to an airport, and board a plane, but not time to speak to her daughter. The pain of that realization was a physical ache in my chest. Around noon, another text came through, this time from Leo. "Hey sis, so sorry about this. Had a massive business opportunity pop up that I couldn't miss, had to be back today to sign the papers. It's a game changer for me, we'll celebrate when you get back, congrats." I stared at the screen, the words blurring through my tears. A business opportunity. A game changer. That was their catastrophic life-or-death emergency. My brother's chance to sign papers for some nightclub investment was more important than my wedding. And my parents, my own mother and father, had decided that his opportunity was a valid reason to abandon me, to leave me to get married alone in a foreign country. The lie was so blatant, so insulting. My mother had called it an emergency, trying to cloak their selfishness in a shroud of concern. Leo, in his typical arrogant fashion, didn't even bother with a good lie. He just told me the truth, seemingly without a shred of remorse, as if I would naturally understand that his financial whims took precedence over a once-in-a-lifetime commitment I was making. The illusion I had carefully constructed around my family shattered into a million pieces. They weren't just thoughtless, they were cruel. They hadn't just made a mistake, they had made a calculated decision. They had weighed my wedding against Leo's business deal and decided my feelings, my milestone, my heart, were worth less. The week-long vacation I had paid for, the luxurious suites, the gourmet meals, the excursions, it was all a transaction. They had taken the gift, consumed it with gusto, and then left without paying the only price I had asked for: their presence. I showed the text to Mark. He read it, then read it again, his face a thundercloud. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just pulled me into his arms. There was nothing to say. The betrayal was absolute. This wasn't something we could fix. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a revelation of their true character. My family did not value me. It was a truth I had probably known on some subconscious level for years, but had always pushed away. I had always been the one to make excuses for them, to smooth things over, to be the mature one. Now, there were no more excuses to be made. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Mark's parents were horrified and endlessly supportive. His mother helped me get into my dress. His father promised to walk me down the aisle. Isabella, the wedding planner, was a godsend. She instructed the staff to rearrange the seating on the beach, removing the 3 empty chairs from the front row so I wouldn't have to look at them. She became my temporary mother, my sister, my friend, all in one. At 4 p.m., as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, I took Mark's father's arm. The small group of Mark's family and our few friends who had made the trip stood, their faces filled with a mixture of sadness for my pain and joy for our union. As I walked down that sandy aisle towards the man I loved, I saw the empty space where my family was supposed to be. But for the first time that day, I didn't feel sadness. I felt a cold, hard resolve. They had shown me what I was worth to them. Now, I would spend the rest of my life showing them what they were worth to me. Nothing. The ceremony was beautiful, despite everything. Marrying Mark, standing before him with the ocean as our witness, was a powerful reminder of what truly mattered. His vows were heartfelt, and when I said mine, I spoke of finding a true family in him and his parents. It was a pointed remark, and I meant every word. Our small group of guests cheered for us with an intensity that filled the void left by my family. The resort staff, who had learned of the situation, stood at a respectful distance, their warm smiles offering a strange comfort. Isabella even had the chef prepare a special, smaller wedding cake for us at the last minute. They treated us with a kindness and decency that my own blood relatives were incapable of. We spent the next few days of our honeymoon in a strange state of newlywed bliss tainted by the bitter aftertaste of betrayal. We tried to enjoy ourselves, to focus on each other, but the conversation always circled back to my family. The why was no longer a mystery, Leo's business opportunity, but the how was still baffling. How could they be so callous, so brazenly selfish? I didn't receive another text or call, not from my mother, my father, or Leo. It was as if, having provided their flimsy excuses, they considered the matter closed. They expected me to just get over it. That expectation was their first major miscalculation. The marketing director in me, the woman who lived by data and details, couldn't let it go. My grief was slowly being replaced by a cold, analytical anger. On the third day of our honeymoon, while Mark was swimming, I opened my laptop. If they considered my wedding nothing more than a transaction, then I was going to treat it the same way. I started by logging into my credit card accounts. I had put every single wedding-related expense on one card to make tracking ease. Why now? I was going to conduct an audit. The first thing I looked at were the hotel folios for their rooms. I had given the resort my card for all room charges, assuming it would cover the occasional cocktail or spa treatment, a generous wedding gift. What I found made my blood run cold. It wasn't just a few cocktails. It was a deluge of extravagant charges. My parents' room had daily charges from the most expensive restaurant on the property, premium wine selections, in-room movie rentals every night, and a couple's massage at the spa that cost nearly $500. They had lived like royalty, sparing no expense, all on my dime. Leo's folio was even worse. His room service bills were astronomical. Multiple meals a day, late-night orders of top-shelf liquor, and minibar charges that suggested he'd emptied it daily. There were charges from the resort's water sports center for a jet ski rental and a private surfing lesson. He had even charged several expensive cigars from the gift shop to the room. The total for their combined incidentals, over 6 days, was just shy of $7,000. I stared at the number in disbelief. This wasn't just enjoying a gift. This was a deliberate, gluttonous fleecing. They had treated my generosity like a blank check with no intention of showing restraint or gratitude. The anger simmering inside me began to boil. This was premeditated. The timeline started to form in my head. They knew about Leo's opportunity before they even arrived in Costa Rica. I scrolled back through my texts from the weeks leading up to the wedding. There it was, a message from Leo a month prior. "Big things are happening, sis. Might be closing on a major deal soon." I had replied with a simple, "That's great," and thought nothing of it. Now it seemed sinister. They had planned this all along. They planned to come, enjoy the free luxury vacation I was providing, and leave just before the main event they were supposed to be there for. They used my wedding as a convenient, all-expenses-paid backdrop for their own selfish plans. My investigation didn't stop there. My mind, now fully in analytical mode, started connecting more dots. I remembered Leo talking to my dad by the pool 2 days before the wedding. They were speaking in low voices, looking at something on my dad's phone. At the time, I assumed it was work-related. Now, I suspected they were finalizing their exit strategy. I remembered my mom asking the concierge an oddly specific question about early morning airport shuttles, which I'd overheard while walking through the lobby. I'd thought she was just curious. In reality, she was performing reconnaissance. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place through social media. A friend of mine, who was also loosely acquainted with Leo, sent me a screenshot. It was a picture Leo had been tagged in on Instagram. The photo was posted on Saturday evening, the evening of my wedding. It showed Leo at a fancy bar back in our hometown, grinning from ear to ear, holding a bottle of champagne. He was surrounded by a group of men in suits. The caption read, "Celebrating the new partnership with my man Leo. Big things to come for Apex Lounge." My brother wasn't just signing papers. He was celebrating at a launch party, popping champagne bottles while I was crying over his empty chair thousands of miles away. There was no emergency. There was no last-minute deal. It was a party. They left my wedding for a party, and my parents enabled it, supported it, and participated in the lie. I saved the screenshot. I downloaded every receipt, every folio, every email confirmation. I created a spreadsheet, itemizing every single dollar I had spent on them. The flights I'd paid for using my travel points, which had a cash value, the 5-star suites, the food, the drinks, the spa treatments, the excursions, the jet ski, every last cent. The grand total was staggering. It was more than the cost of a new car. It was a small fortune I had happily spent, believing it was for family. Now it was just a debt, and I was determined to collect. The grief was gone, replaced by the iciest, clearest sense of purpose I had ever felt. They had made a business decision, so would I. Mark returned from his swim to find me not in tears, but hunched over my laptop with a look of grim determination he knew all too well from my late nights working on major marketing campaigns. "What are you doing?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. I turned the screen towards him and showed him the spreadsheet. It was meticulously organized, with columns for dates, item descriptions, categories, lodging, food, activities, and costs. The final cell, highlighted in bold red, displayed the grand total: 23,457.21. Mark whistled softly. "Wow, they really did a number on you." "They did," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "They treated this entire week as a transaction. They received goods and services and left without fulfilling their end of the bargain, being sent at our wedding. So, I'm going to do what any business does when a client defaults on a contract. I'm sending them an invoice." Mark looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. He knew this side of me, the side that didn't get mad but got strategic. "An invoice," he repeated, the idea clearly appealing to his own structured, methodical mind. "I love it, but what's the end game? Do you really think they'll pay it?" "Honestly, no," I admitted. "My mother will shriek, my father will bluster, and Leo will probably laugh. This isn't about getting the money, not really. It's about accountability. It's about taking away their power to pretend this was just a simple misunderstanding. I'm going to present them with the cold, hard, itemized truth of their selfishness. There will be no room for excuses, no way to twist the narrative. They will be forced to look at the exact cost of what they did." My plan had 2 phases. Phase 1 was the invoice itself. It couldn't just be a list of numbers. It had to be a professional, undeniable document. I spent the next 2 days of our honeymoon, in between romantic dinners and walks on the beach, crafting the perfect invoice. I used a template from my own company's accounting department. I created a letterhead with a simple, elegant K and M monogram. I titled the document, "Invoice for Services Rendered and Expenses Incurred for Costa Rica Event." I listed every single charge, from the $4,200 per suite for the week to the $8 for a bag of cashews from Leo's minibar. I included the cash value of the airline miles I had used for their tickets. I added a separate line item for breach of contract fee, which I calculated as 20% of the total, explaining in a footnote that this was for failure to attend the contracted main event, resulting in significant emotional distress. For the due date, I put 30 days from the date of issue. For the memo, I wrote, "For services and goods accepted and consumed during the week of the wedding you chose not to attend." It was petty, it was precise, and it was perfect. Phase 2 was the delivery. I knew I couldn't just email it. That was too easy to ignore, to delete. This required a confrontation. It had to be done in person, where I could control the narrative and see their faces. We were due to fly home on Sunday. I decided we would visit them the following weekend. I wouldn't give them any warning. I would just show up, invoice in hand. But I needed more than just the invoice. I needed visual aids. I contacted Isabella and our wedding photographer, who had already sent us the digital proofs. I asked him to create a special, small photo album. The first few pages were beautiful shots of Mark and me getting ready, of the stunning scenery, of his parents beaming with pride. Then, I had him include the pictures of the ceremony itself. A wide shot of the beach, showing the rows of chairs with the glaringly empty space in the front row. A picture of Mark's father walking me down the aisle, a stand-in for my own. A close-up of my face as I said my vows, my eyes shining with a mixture of love for Mark and the pain of my family's absence. The final page was a single, powerful image, Mark and me, kissing at the altar, with a backdrop of empty chairs where my family should have been. It was a silent, brutal testament to their betrayal. I also printed the screenshot of Leo's champagne-fueled celebration party. I put it in a separate envelope. That was just for him. The plan was simple and methodical. We would go to my parents' house on Saturday afternoon when I knew they would all likely be there for their traditional family dinner. I would calmly greet them. I would let them stumble through whatever awkward excuses they had prepared. Then, I would present them with the wedding album. As they looked through it, I would hand them the invoice. I would explain, in clear, businesslike terms, that since they had viewed the week as a vacation and not a wedding, I had recategorized the expenses accordingly. For Leo, I would save his special envelope for last. Mark was fully on board. He helped me fine-tune the details, acting as a sounding board for what I would say. No yelling, he advised. No crying, just be calm, factual, and unwavering. Treat it like you're firing an underperforming employee. His analogy was grimly appropriate. That's exactly what this felt like. I was severing a professional, or in this case, a familial, relationship due to a complete failure to meet even the most basic expectations. As we packed our bags to leave Costa Rica, I folded the invoice and tucked it carefully into my carry-on. The weight of it felt strangely satisfying. It wasn't just paper, it was my declaration of independence. I was no longer their responsible, accommodating, people-pleasing daughter and sister. I was a creditor, and I was coming to collect. The week back home was quiet. My family, true to form, maintained radio silence. It was an RO. Gant, calculated silence, designed to force me into the position of the pursuer, the one who would eventually have to break and ask for an explanation. They assumed that, as always, I would be the one to bridge the gap, to smooth things over. They had no idea I was building a bridge of my own, and I was going to burn it down right in front of them. On Saturday afternoon, Mark and I drove to my parents' house. I was dressed in a sharp blazer and trousers, my boardroom armor, as Mark called it. I felt strangely calm, the nervous flutters in my stomach having been replaced by a cold, steady resolve. I held the beautifully wrapped wedding album in one hand and a crisp manila envelope containing the invoice in the other. When we pulled into their driveway, I saw Leo's car was already there. Perfect. My dad, David, opened the door. His face registered a brief flash of surprise, followed by a strained, uncomfortable smile. "Kathy, Mark, what a surprise. We were just about to eat." "I'm sure you were," I said, my voice neutral. We stepped inside. My mother, Susan, and Leo were in the living room. The moment they saw me, an awkward hush fell over the room. My mother rushed forward, her hands fluttering nervously. "Oh, Kathy, honey, I've been meaning to call. Things have just been so hectic." "Hectic?" I repeated, the single word hanging in the air. I can imagine. Closing on a nightclub investment is very demanding. I looked directly at Leo, whose confident smirk faltered for a second. "We wanted to drop something off," I continued, moving towards the coffee table. "Since you couldn't be there, we wanted to share some photos from the wedding." I placed the album on the table. My mother reached for it eagerly, as if this gesture meant all was forgiven. "Oh, how lovely, let's see them." The first few pages elicited the expected responses. "Oh, Kathy, you look beautiful. What a stunning location." They were playing their parts, pretending to be the proud, loving family. Then they turned the page to the pictures of the ceremony. My mother's smile froze. She was looking at the photo of the empty chairs in the front row. My dad peered over her shoulder, his jovial facade crumbling. "What is?" My mother started, her voice a whisper. "That's where you were supposed to be," I said calmly. I let the silence stretch out, thick and uncomfortable. They flipped to the next page, the one of Mark's father walking me down the aisle. My dad flinched as if he'd been struck. Leo, who had been trying to look nonchalant, was now staring at the album with a guarded expression. They reached the final page, the kiss framed by the empty chairs. My mother closed the album slowly, refusing to meet my eyes. "Now for the administrative part," I said, my tone shifting to the crisp, no-nonsense voice I used at work. I opened the manila envelope and pulled out 3 copies of the invoice. I handed one to my parents and one to Leo. "What is this?" my father demanded, his voice defensive. "It's an invoice," I stated simply. "It seems there was a miscommunication. I had budgeted for a wedding, which was to include your presence. You, however, chose to partake in a luxury vacation package. So, I have recategorized the expenses accordingly." This is a detailed breakdown of all the goods and services you consumed. My father's face turned beet red as he scanned the itemized list. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. $23,000. Are you insane? This is a joke, right? I assure you it's no joke, I said. You'll see charges for every meal, every drink, every spa treatment, every single thing you enjoyed before you abandoned us. Leo let out a short, incredulous laugh. You're seriously charging us for a vacation after you invited us? I invited you to my wedding, I corrected him, my voice like ice. An event which, you may recall, you failed to attend. You chose a party instead. I pulled the smaller envelope from my purse and tossed it onto the coffee table in front of him. Speaking of which, I believe this is you. You look like you were having a great time. I'm so glad my wedding fund could help you celebrate your emergency in style. Leo opened it and stared at the picture of himself, beaming with champagne. The color drained from his face. My parents looked at the photo, then at Leo, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning horror. My mother's emergency lie was now completely exposed. Kathy, this is outrageous, my father boomed, trying to regain control. We are your family. My family? I asked, and for the first time, a tremor of real emotion entered my voice. My family was supposed to be there. My family wouldn't have used me for a free ride and then left me to get married in front of strangers. You three stopped being my family when you got on that 7 a.m. flight. My mother started to cry, the manipulative tears I had seen 1,000 times. But Leo's future was on the line. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I hope it was worth it, I said, looking at each of them in turn. I hope it was worth this. The invoice is due in 30 days. You can work out the payment details amongst yourselves. Mark and I stood up to leave. You can't be serious, Kathy, my father said, his voice a low growl. You're going to destroy this family over money. I paused at the door and turned back to look at them, three selfish people sitting amidst the ruins of what we once were. You're mistaken, I said, my voice clear and final. You already destroyed this family. The money is just the bill for the damages. And with that, we walked out the door, leaving them with their pretty album, their incriminating photograph, and the staggering bill for their betrayal. The silence from my family in the days following the confrontation was absolute. It was different from the arrogant silence after the wedding. This was the stunned silence of people who had been so thoroughly outmaneuvered they had no idea how to respond. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. I was no longer the daughter and sister they could manipulate and take for granted. I was a stranger to whom they owed a great deal of money. Of course, I never expected them to actually pay. The invoice was a symbol, a final, concrete statement, but their reaction, or lack thereof, told me everything I needed to know. There was no apology, no attempt at reconciliation, no acknowledgement of the pain they had caused. Their pride and their wallets had been wounded, and that was all that mattered to them. About 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from a lawyer. My own parents had hired an attorney. The letter was full of legal jargon, but the gist was simple. They considered the invoice a form of harassment and demanded I cease all contact. They denied any liability for the expenses, claiming they were a gift with no conditions attached. They were threatening legal action if I persisted. I laughed. It was the most ludicrous, yet perfectly predictable, thing they could have done. Rather than face their own monstrous behavior, they hid behind a lawyer. They were willing to legally sever ties with their own daughter to avoid paying for their vacation. I showed the letter to Mark. He shook his head in disbelief. They're actually spending money on a lawyer to tell you to go away instead of just apologizing. It's who they are, I said, and for the first time I felt a sense of peace about it. The last vestiges of hope I might have held for them to change, to feel remorse, were finally extinguished. I had my answer. I wrote a simple, one-line response to their lawyer, message received, and I cut them out of my life completely. I blocked their numbers. I blocked them on social media. I instructed my in-laws, who were wonderfully supportive, not to pass on any information about us. When they sent a small, pathetic wedding gift to our house a month later, a crystal vase, no doubt an attempt to create a paper trail of goodwill for their lawyer, I sent it back with a note. Return to sender. Address unknown. It was brutal, but it was necessary. I was amputating a toxic limb to save the rest of my life. The months that followed were healing. Mark and I focused on our new life together. We built a life founded on mutual respect, honesty, and true partnership. Our home became a sanctuary filled with the love of friends and his wonderful family who embraced me as their own daughter. I learned what real family felt like. It wasn't about obligation or blood, it was about showing up. It was about support, sacrifice, and unconditional love, all the things my biological family had proven incapable of. I never heard directly from my parents or brother again. Through the grapevine of distant relatives, I heard bits and pieces. Leo's nightclub investment apparently went sour within a year, and he lost a significant amount of money. My parents were forced to bail him out, putting a strain on their own finances. There was a grim, karmic justice in that, but I found I didn't take much pleasure in it. Their lives and their self-made problems no longer concerned me. They were ghosts from a past life. A year after the wedding, Mark and I went back to Costa Rica. We stayed at the same resort. We saw Isabella, who greeted us with huge hugs and treated us like visiting royalty. On the evening of our first anniversary, we walked down to the beach where we got married. We watched the sunset, the same beautiful sky that had been the backdrop to so much pain and so much joy. Mark took my hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. "How things ended with them." I thought about it for a moment, about the empty chairs and the years of being taken for granted. I thought about the invoice, the lawyer's letter, and the quiet peace of the last year. "No," I said, my voice hurt. "I regret that they weren't the people I needed them to be, but I don't are." Egret leaving them behind. That day, I lost a family, but I also gained one, and I wouldn't trade the family I have now for anything in the world. We stood there in the twilight, a stronger union forged in the fire of betrayal. They had left me with empty chairs, but I had built a life full of people who would never, ever leave my side. And that was worth more than any amount of money.